Thank you. I want to thank the RAMS board for giving me this time. I am going to be cognizant of your time. I've got a timekeeper in the back, so it will be 10 minutes. Thank you. A few of you know me already from my job and my role as fire chief in Virginia and the emergency manager. For those of you that don't, I'm also an adjunct professor with Columbia Southern University, and I'm also an associate consultant with Emergency Services Consulting International. So I have a couple of hats that I wear. What I want to talk to you about tonight is something that the Office of the Legislative Auditor is going to address tomorrow in a formal session with the Health and Human Services Committee, and that's the state of EMS in Minnesota. So this is a formal report that's going to be released at 1 p.m. tomorrow between 1 and 3. It's the Office of the Legislative Auditor, and I was interviewed for this report. One of the things that they're going to talk about in that report is the state of EMS in Minnesota and how dire of a situation we're in. I do not want to understate it. We are in a crisis situation with emergency medical services right now. And each of you in your own communities have been affected by this. I guarantee you, not because it's an Iron Range issue, because it's a statewide issue and it's a national issue. We have declining numbers of volunteers. We have increasing numbers of calls. We have rising costs associated with providing emergency medical services, and we have rising costs of keeping those personnel trained, keeping those personnel engaged. And it doesn't matter which model we use. It could be the volunteer model, it could be the combination model, it could be the career model. I have empty positions at Virginia Fire right now. It is very hard to find personnel. The Great Resignation is no joke. It's affecting EMS agencies. Where we're seeing that is in the calls like this one that I'll talk about. A woman called 911 who was in severe abdominal pain. An ambulance was paged. There was no response, and it was paged again. A third time the ambulance was paged, there was also no response, and a second ambulance was paged from a neighboring district. There was no response from that ambulance 3 times. The third ambulance was paged. Finally, the woman in severe abdominal pain received an ambulance 46 minutes later. She would have been better off just having somebody drive her to the hospital. And unfortunately, we're seeing that all too often. There's a number of issues that are contributing to this. The cost of providing EMS has skyrocketed, while a reimbursement model at the state or at the federal level especially. There's what's called Medicare, Medicaid, and PMAP reimbursement rates. They cap rates, meaning that no matter how much you spend on an EMS call, you are only going to be compensated X number of dollars, and they vary, and I'm not going to get into the details. It's about $450 for a basic life support call and about $560 for an advanced life support call. Every time our ambulance in Virginia rolls out the door, we are spending over $570 for that call. That's what it costs to provide that service. Add on the cost of medications, and then add on the cost of providing service to a 640 square mile area when only 17 square miles of the city of Virginia pay for it. This means that what we bill other people in those surrounding townships and those cities is not coming back to the city. So we have an inequitable delivery of this service because it is not being equitably paid for. And so the tax burden falls on to some of these cities that provide EMS and is not shared. And there is no taxing district as of yet to do that. Well, excuse me, there is a taxing district. It's optional if you want to opt in or into it or not. So far, nobody's opted in. That's sunsetted. There was a law passed last year which authorized the establishment of both fire and EMS taxing districts. So they did reauthorize the ability to form those districts. So what I'm saying is that this issue doesn't just affect the city of Virginia, it affects each one of you in your communities. And when people do not receive that level of care that they need, when we have people in cardiac arrests that literally collapse and die in a snowbank, and the ambulance service paged to respond to them does not respond because there are no volunteers, because there is no staffing roster, or when we have ambulances that are out of their primary jurisdiction because they're out running transfer calls rather than taking, the emergency calls. And I'll talk about the emergency transfers within the St. Louis County. Last year, there was just over 21,000 incidents. Virginia Fire responded to 4,467 of those incidents. As of today, we've responded to over 15 incidents just today. 1 was a structure fire and 2 were emergency or medical transports. We had 7 different fire departments come and help us out today on that structure fire in Virginia. That is something that we're relying more and more on our neighbors. And so, Albert Einstein had a good quote. He once said, if I had a problem to solve, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes coming up with solutions. But we don't have time to come up with solutions tonight. So I just wanted to present to the RAMS board that the EMS issues that are facing the entire state, that are facing our area, are going to require some new ways of thinking. The siloed, individualistic, parochialistic approaches that each city, each township, each person has tried to resolve their EMS issues is no longer working. Last week, I had 4 different first responder groups paged to calls where we responded on, and nobody responded. So in these townships, and one of them was over 20 minutes away, and I'm purposely avoiding the names, and because it's not my desire to embarrass or malign anybody. The problem is not the individuals in these services. The problem is the structure that we currently have that does not support our first responders and our EMTs. We have not compensated them appropriately, and we have not provided them the tools and the equipment that they need. And therefore, we're seeing these declining numbers. But when you have 4 different districts in a row that do not respond because they literally have no personnel, that's a crisis. When somebody dies in a snowbank and the ambulance that is in their area does not respond, that is a crisis. And when it affects you or your family, then it's going to be a very, very personal crisis. I guess this is a call to action. We can no longer, bear the brunt of being, I compare it to a rubber band. We're being stretched in all directions. We do intercept calls with over 1,000 square miles beyond our 640 square miles that we cover. An intercept is a call where a basic life support service says, we have a patient that has a cardiac problem, a stroke, a significant trauma. We need advanced life support. We need paramedics. We need that critical care skills to save this person's life. Will you come and help us? And we say yes. The cost of that service keeps continuing to rise. We've recently had to raise our rates. That's impacted basic life support services who only make that $450. Well, when we have to charge $600 for an intercept, there goes all of the revenue that they could make from that call, and they're struggling to survive. I'll say it again. The EMTs that are volunteer and paid on call are doing the best they can. I get calls from ambulance directors and EMTs individually that are literally in tears because they don't know what else to do to help their service survive and sustain. Some of them suffer from a lack of support from their city councils or township boards. Some of them feel like no one cares. Some of them have told me, if I don't do it, nobody will come. And sadly, they're right. Nobody will come. And we're facing this situation that we have to work together. And I will just leave it at that. We don't have time for discussion. I'm open to conversation. If anybody would like to contact me, I'm more than willing to talk. I'd love to hear your ideas on how to work together, and I'm willing to be part of the solution.
Is this something that we need like a longer, this is just a huge issue and it's going on all across northern Minnesota. One of the things that you said, the reimbursement at the federal level, I guess the first question would be like, if that reimbursement was increased to accurate, more accurate levels, would that fix things? Probably. I'm going to assume some, but not all, because we also have a lack of personnel and volunteers. But
if the federal reimbursement level were doubled, we could at least break even. We do not even break even on our 911 calls. If we did not do interfacility transfers, our ambulance service would be in the red and would not be sustainable. There are other funding streams that we can look at, and I don't want to get into the weeds on the county type of funding and things like that, but any revenue stream would help at this point. I'll give an example. St. Louis County gives us $16 a call and 22 cents a mile for calls to unorganized townships. That formula was established in 1982. It was revised in 1984. $16 a call and 22 cents a mile. You heard that right. That's what we're dealing with. I will give a lot of credit to Commissioners Nelson and Commissioners McDonald, who have been working on a timber sales allocation to help sustain that. It's a small step. They all admit that, but it's a step in the right direction to look for revenue. And I also want to thank Representative Dave Lizelgar, who recommended this as a forum to bring this issue forward. Our city council has heard this issue from me a number of times, but it's getting to the point, and it's getting to the point where multiple people have contacted me. We see services literally closing around us, and without getting into specifics, it's very, very close to home.
Yeah. Pat, do you have a question you want to just ask? Go ahead.
Yes, Chief, thank you for the presentation. And it's no different in Itasca County with our small ambulance services as well. So obviously there's a short term and there's a long term. Do you have anything that RAMS can do to help in this short term? And is there any plan that's being talked about in the long term to try to fix the situation?
Short term, I would just say that RAMS could be a voice for action at the legislative level and for some reform on some of the legislation with regard to redoing some of the Emergency Medical Services Regulatory Board regulations. That's one step of it. They could be a voice for increased and additional funding from the state. You know, we have over $7 billion surplus right now. I would love to have a trust fund like our last speaker talked about. Where's my trust fund for EMS? You know, where's your trust fund for EMS? So I think that awareness of the problem is the first step, and then getting people, because if people don't know that there's a problem, you know, one person, you know, told me that they were afraid that I would talk tonight and scare people to death. And I said, well, you know what? I want you to be scared now because I don't want you to be, you know, in terror when you don't get an ambulance. So yes, it is something to be concerned about. The sky isn't literally falling. It's already fallen in some places. So
I mean, I think there would be the potential for a larger like forum where we actually put out there and have people, because I mean, we're just 22 board member and you weren't on the agenda. And so like half of our members, you know, most of our members didn't know you'd be here tonight. But what I'm just saying is like, I think there'd be a lot more people that would be interested in hearing about this, and maybe RAMS hosts a specific meeting that we open it up to communities, even if they aren't RAMS members, to listen, I mean, not just you, we're not gonna put it all on you, but have some other, you know, panelists or people that want to listen in, and then communities maybe talk about action items. I don't know.
I would welcome that discussion. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Here's an example that we're dealing with. Helen Course West Road, the city development council. You get a new ambulance train and usually replace one every year. Right now, you can't get an ambulance until 2023. They're not available anyplace. At $300,000 or more, I don't know what the exact cost is right now. But you end up putting, we changed chassis sizes, it was bigger ambulance, last longer, get over 300,000 miles out of them now. But they break down, and you don't have enough. We run 6 ambulances minimum on our service. These other communities are in the same boats where they can't afford the ambulance. So it's all over the state. It's not just up there. We've been looking at this in that as very previous. Same thing. We're not trying to squeeze water on the turnip, but it's becoming critical for medical care up in this area. We just sold the hospital to Essential. They're planning on building a new facility up here in Virginia to get more modern care. That's going to be 4 or 5 years down the road. So I mean, it's one of those things that things are changing and you can't use the old ways. Ellen, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Pat, did you have another question, or is your hand just raised?
No, my question was, is there any legislation that's being proposed this year that's been introduced that we as a RAMS board could support and have our lobbyists kind of follow and lend our support towards it?
Jeff can't make it tonight. He's in it. Alan, is there legislation that you could send to us that you're referencing for the increased cost, you know, like reimbursements at the state level?
Yes, there's multiple bills that have been reimbursed that
Okay.
are free that have been introduced, but multiple.
Yeah. So if you were to send me some of those that you're talking about, then our legislative committee could get together in the meantime and kind of review those before asking the board to take a position, you know, a position on those.
Thank you, Ina.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. We will move on to item number 6, our director's report.
Oh, okay, I'll switch it back. All right. I included the February director's report and added that to the calendar invite. You can look that over just to see the